I'll just have you pull up the deck.
Yeah, on it.
Hi, everybody. We're just getting started here. We're going to give another minute or so here for everybody who wants to join to get joined. Hope everybody is doing okay on this Thursday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. All right, we'll just give it another couple seconds here. Hello for everybody who's just joining. We'll be getting started in a moment here. All right, I think we are good to get going. So thank you everybody for joining us for today's webinar. As you can see, our topic today is designing a QMS driven by company mapping. We'll get to that next slide here. So I'd like to welcome this week's guest host. We've got Daniel Perez Castillo, who's a management systems architect. He's a multicultural mechatronics engineer and architect of digital solutions, a liaison between tech and business. Features in innovation, streamlining, technical problem solving, communication, solutions developer, and in leadership. And we're very happy to have him speaking with us today. Daniel, I'll let you take over on that agenda there. Oh,
Yeah,
you're
thank
muted.
you. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm there. Sorry. Yeah, thank you for that. I click in advance. So yeah, well, yeah, thank you everyone for joining and allow us to share with you our ideas, and especially myself to give you my views on how to effectively architect your quality management systems. As Mari said about me, I kind of do this for a living. So I have been creating management systems in different companies, big ones, small ones, automotive industry, aerospace, medical, tobacco, and I keep finding other cases where I realize that all this is applicable. So for today's session, to cover the main intent, that is how to effectively build your system mapping a company, I will cover four main things. We will talk about how to build a management system by mapping your enterprise and what it makes sense to truly map your enterprise instead of the traditional just one location at a time. I will give my take on how to apply process mapping to contrast the as-is status to the ideal one, and how that actually is a good way of finding or paving a path for improvement. Also, we will talk a little about how to include or how your APQP or your program management, your product lifecycle models meet your QMS architecture, and again, well, why it makes sense to truly make sure that those pieces are aligned. And through the presentation, provide some tips on how to create a flexible system that evolves with your organization, right? Because at the end of the day, companies are these kind of entities that are always changing and adapting to markets. All right, so.
Great. I think we're gonna run to our first poll now. This is just kind of an introduction to get some feedback and some information from all of our participants. So you should see that popped up on your screen now. We've just got 3 quick multiple choice questions. We would like to get to know a little bit about our audience. So if I could get everybody just to take a moment here and run through those questions. First, we want to know, how is your current QMS primarily structured? We've got a few different options there. Our second question is, which best describes your current use of process mapping in QMS design? And then for our final question is, when thinking about your organization, which statement resonates the most? And we want to know if your QMS is rigid and outdated, if it needs the opportunity to have some change, or if you don't even have a functioning QMS at this time. So this will just help us kind of understand, how can we best help you? While you're answering these poll questions, I would just like to take a moment to let everybody know that we do have a Q&A feature at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions that pop up, if you're unsure or want to know more about something Daniel's telling you about, please feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A box. I will be handling those, and we'll take some time with them at the end of the webinar. So I'm just going to hit end on this poll now. Looks like we got some pretty spread across the board answers for a lot of these, which is great. As you can see, looks like most of you guys have your QMS structured around ISO 9001. Most of you do already engage in QMS mapping, which is great. And then it looks like some of you are struggling with your current system. So hopefully today will be a very helpful webinar for you. And with that, I am going to hide for a little bit, and Daniel, we will take it away with you. And everybody, I will see you for the Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for your responses. That also helped me tailor my message and know where to put emphasis. I'll be ready for questions if you have some at the end. So to paint the picture and align our understanding of what a QMS truly is and why we do this and why some customers, if you have mandate you to do the ISO thing and all that, I just want to start with a conceptual explanation of what's really the QMS, because I know there are different interpretations or ideas about what exactly is a QMS. So everything really starts with the market out there. So this picture is, we have a lot of potential customers representing with these three kind of the market. And in reality, well, they are potential customers because they have several elements, but for these, the most important one is they have some needs. Some of them do, some of them don't, or don't realize they have it, right? So out of this pool of potential customers, we can see some of them are clearly looking for a solution, a product, a service, right? Some others are not. And also the other component that makes them interesting for our companies is, well, are they willing to pay to fulfill that need, right? If they have that combination, like this guy here, it's like, well, they have the need, they identify it, they are aware of it, and also they are willing to pay for it. That's actually some customer that we are willing to engage with, right? So these two components, we could find many companies out there that have the need, but maybe they are not in the moment to pay for our services and all that. So this is truly what our salespeople are looking for, right? So our company, super generic here, is your company. You put your slogan there. Well, our company goes out there and engage with these potential customers through marketing, through sales, and whatever. We are basically attracting that need. We say, well, Mr. Customer, potential customer, we could actually solve this for you, right? And then internally, we have this magic inside where we say, I take your need, right? I do my magic, and then I get a product for you. I deliver back to you in the form of physical products, services, whatever is the solution that your company creates. And then we actually turn that customer into a satisfied customer. And satisfied customer means two things: is they pay for the service or the product, and also they are willing to engage again with us. So this loop is really what companies wants to create and repeat over and over, right? This is good business. This is a reason for a company to exist. If any of these things break, then the company will not have the money to operate and to do all these things, right? So that's kind of the end game in a market for any company out there, right? So needs, and then if we put it more into an inputs and outputs, is needs are the inputs, products are the outputs, and then the feedback is the payment, right? So if your company is really good at what they do, then that magic hat is very important. That's your success factor. But the point is, how do we actually ensure that that magic is consistently happening, right? Remember, the game is do it once and again and again. Or if we are not good at that, or we are kind of inconsistent, how do we actually improve that so this cycle happens efficiently and yeah, and we get a better and stronger company competitive advantage, all those things, right? So if I go to the traditional approach, we take reality. I'm just saying this is the reality, and we have tools that in traditional sense we call them management systems. More modern terms are digital twins. We could also say this is modeling of a company, right? So the traditional approach is take well, write what you do and do what you say, right? Around those terms. And we go to a document-based system, right? The traditional recipe of saying, write procedures, and then you say, well, we have a sales, we have the design, we have this, and then we jump directly into stating that, and standards like ISO, IATF, AS, SAE, all those give us pieces of this, of saying, well, if you are playing, for example, in the automotive industry, well, then the industry basically says, well, to play in this industry, I want you to have certain things inside your company to make sure that as a supplier, you are strong, you are doing good business, and we can actually engage in this cycle of you give me products, I pay you for products, right? So nothing wrong about doing it this way. This is kind of what every company probably does the first time that they need to put these things in place. But the classical approach has fault pits, right? If we start with a procedures-based system, we create very rigid structures because it's an overmix of what we see in the reality. We are capturing who is doing what, but it's not cleaning a way of saying, well, if people move around, then our procedures no longer reflect reality. Or if we get a new location, suddenly what we do in one location on paper, not necessarily match with what is happening in another location. So it creates this very, very rigid structure, right? And the side effect is this additional and sometimes tremendous effort to keep reality and this paper-based kind of system aligned, right? So one thing that as companies mature realize is your quality management system is not really the same as your document management system, right? Calling the QMS, the SharePoint, or the whatever system you use, pool of documents, the management system limits what you actually can do with that. Documents at the end of the day are nothing else than communication tools, right? We write down documents to capture how we want things to happen and communicate to the world instead of repeating ourselves over and over. It becomes very efficient tool if you have multiple locations, you have a decentralized organization. Well, it's a good way to communicate, but it's not really what drives what is happening, right? If people do not follow what the papers say, then it's not effective. It also creates this trap of, or the audit trap of saying, well, we have to write the documents to show in audits that we are complying with things. But it's very easy to fall into, well, we show that the document is saying what needs to say, right? But the alignment to reality becomes a tricky factor. So to say that is what I just want to clarify is this decoupling of saying, well, management system is nothing else than a way to create a model or create a virtual replica, a digital twin of what's happening in reality. So documents is an approach with these things, but we very easily could get reality and documents misaligned, right? Changes that drive this misalignment, right? You have seen, well, if there is an organizational change, right? So if we change who is executing tasks, well, that creates a very easy to see misalignment. Now we don't have this layer of middle management that was reorganized, and suddenly all our documents are not necessarily telling us what actually happens, right? Because people change or titles change, or now we reorganize in divisions or regions or move pieces of our operation to another building. So that's a change that impacts our documentation quite often. Another one that is less frequent is, well, when geography changes, right? So when I say geography, I mean there is a new location. There is a transfer of some function from headquarters to another location, or we have a tech center that was in one place, now it's moved to another, or split in two locations for convenience, stuff like that. Those are less frequent, but when geography changes happen, they have big impacts. And the last one is that is not changing that often are the activities themselves, right? So we have we have to sell things, we have to design things, we have to manufacture things, we have to provide services. Somebody has to do HR management, somebody has to take care of the money side of this. So what needs to happen is kind of the part that does not change that much. So what I am proposing here is to have a slightly different approach on how you build your management system, your digital twins, and think in 4 dimensions. So your reality will not change no matter how you model it, no matter what you write on paper. Reality is reality, right? So first thing is we have geography, right? And that this is probably the easiest to grasp when we talk about geography, like where are my locations, my layout, where are my machines, etc. The second dimension is the people, right? Like who is a part of the organization, and I will talk a little more about this one. Also easy to grasp. The third one is the activities that happen, right? Which are the processes, and then inside the processes, which tasks we have, and all that. And the last one that traditionally is kind of left aside if you're a quality guy, but it's very important, is the money flow, right? Because the money is the one that keeps all this alive, right? Like how the resources are moving around my company. It doesn't mean that you have to create 4 parallel systems, right? It's more how you structure your management system when you are mapping your processes. When you are doing that, well, we need to have a very clear understanding of these 4 things exist, and if we are aware of those, then we can create a flexible system. So I'll jump into the first one. So when we talk about geography, so we are talking about, depending on the size of your organization or your company. If you're a multi-location global organization, well, yeah, then you have to start from the macro. And I have there an image of here, kind of a Google Maps. Is that, well, you have to start from the top to map. Well, we have 4 locations in different continents, and then you kind of zoom in into one location, and then you are mapping where things happen. Why is this important, right? Because it takes a lot of time to get your people to have that in their minds, right? So your system should very easily show them how where the physical things are. Many times I had been in companies where they are in the US, let's say, and they claim that their headquarters are in, I don't know, in New York, right? Let's say, but in reality, that's just a regional administration office or a regional headquarters. The real top management is maybe in Germany, right? Or maybe it's in Japan, but they are kind of isolated from the world, right? So your management system should actually allow them to understand, okay, I am part of a bigger thing. If your company is 1 or 2 locations, well, it's easier, right? Because your people can physically go there. But still, we need to have this map. tools that are used for that, and you can see that is layouts, 3D models if you need that, or even simple list of areas. But this should be decoupled from your procedures, right? If you put it inside your procedures, people need to read through a lot of documents to start painting that picture. So geography, it's easier to capture in tools that are more graphical. Yeah, the other thing that you want, well, geography changes, as I said, do not happen that often. But when there is a change, the impact will be very, 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 very huge in your company, right? Opening a new factory, closing a factory, merging locations, reallocating, or reshaping the buildings, stuff like that, right? So you want to capture this one. But I think this one is that difficult to grasp. And probably you have, I'm sure you have pieces and bits. But as I said, the thing here is how you are mapping your company. So first dimension, understand the physical world. The second one is about the people in the organization, right? So here is where, if you are writing procedures and truly describing exactly what you see, and you say, the plant manager is responsible for this, or the quality manager is doing that, or the technician, whatever, you're hard coding a lot of things. A lot of responsibilities become attached to a specific people or a specific jobs on an organizational chart. The issue comes again, well, if there is reorganization, if suddenly your quality manager becomes, or the position is merged with the engineering manager, there is no longer quality manager by itself, right? It's a different job. Then that misalignment happens. So when you map the dimension of people, you have to avoid hard coding those. You have to talk about roles. So instead of saying the quality manager is, well, the responsible for, or the process owner of this, that in this location happens to be in this moment the quality manager, is responsible for that, right? So you decouple that. You don't hard code your org chart there. So you should be talking about the roles, about functions, right? Because if well, as I said, you restructure 1 year from now, 2 years from now, the organization changes, then you can very easily say, well, now the process owner of correction is no longer this title, it's this one. Nothing changed in your procedures, nothing changes in the way you structure your mapping of the people responsibility. I'm sorry. So organizational changes not necessarily have a huge impact. Well, depending on the size, if there are like reductions of headcounts that are drastic, of course they do. But these are very constant, even in a single location, a factory. For example, who is responsible of the control plan, right, or the PFMEA? And I had seen it moving in different companies. At certain points is quality, then they decide that it goes to engineering, then it comes back, then it's a shared responsibility, etc. But if we do it by role and we say, well, whoever is the responsible for the control plan has all these to execute all these things, then it doesn't matter. It's just like having a cap, and then the cap is just moving from one to the other, right? So that's the people dimension. And the third one, which is closer to home, if you're a quality person, is, well, your activities dimension, right? Like what happens, how it's done, right? So this one, we have a good recipe, because this is not something that we had to reinvent. Most of, or a big portion of the answers we're pointing into, we do the ISO approach, right? So the ISO recipe, if we read through ISO 9000, ISO 9001, 9004, all of those together, what they are giving us is a map, is telling us how you could look through the processes lenses into your company and describe it, right? So it starts with a PDCA, like here. So it's saying you take a need, it goes to your PDCA, that's your magic hat, and then you will get a product, right? The reason why they did that is because, well, these guys or this organization interacts with a lot of industries, and because of that, with thousands, if not millions, of different companies. And they found that, in essence, this is very constant. If we look through processes, companies have almost the same processes. It's more about how we name them, especially, or how we group different pieces, but it's very constant. So let's start with the PDCA, and if we go into that one, truly the magic recipe for a process map is you have always a operations kind of lane, and this is in other standards they call this the value adding path, right? Because that's when you're saying, well, the value adding from the customer point of view, right? That are the fundamental things that need to happen for the customer to give you an idea, or from giving you an idea all the way to receiving back their product or their service, right? Their solution, and creating that satisfaction. And then we have down here supporting areas, which is all the functions or processes, really activities that are needed for the operations to happen. So we are talking about, well, people are needed. So we need to have a human resources management process. We also need infrastructure management. We need environmental conditions for our processes. Well, that one is still there. And for example, one that is many times not included in ISO kind of certified systems is the accounting and finances process, because it's claimed, well, it's out of scope. Well, it's out of scope of certification, but there is no single company in this world that does not have the money side. Otherwise, that company is bankrupt already, right? And probably is one of the first processes that are put in place. And ironically, it's probably one of the few that is most standard around the world, and probably well managed, right? Because of consequences, legislation, all that. So second thing here is, when you map, you have to map everything that is needed for your company to operate. Doesn't matter if it's in the scope of certification for any standard. We could talk about 14,000. We could talk about many others, even cybersecurity, whatever. It's like different standards give you different scopes for certification. But what you are doing here when you are mapping is you're trying to understand all the things that are needed for your company to operate correctly. When you are in front of an auditor, yeah, of course, you will say, well, Mr. Auditor, for ISO, you cannot go into my finance process out of the scope, but it exists, right? So the auditor should just say, well, okay, that's out of the scope. But internally for you, makes perfect sense to understand the bigger picture. If I go into, well, I will go into a typical flow or processes for the operations. We have find customers, design products or services, design how to produce them, put all in place, and produce and deliver. This is the fundamental sequence, right? We could name it differently. We could say this is sales, marketing, product design, manufacturing process design, new product introduction, manufacturing, delivery, purchasing, all that. At the end of the day, is a sequence of events that take us from grabbing the need, finding customers and their needs, and creating a solution and delivering to this one. Well, you see my annotation here, and down here is if you are in the aerospace or automotive industry, this probably looks familiar. This is nothing else than your APQP model, right? Or the traditional, if you take it out of the book, or if you create your own in your company. But at the end of the day, is your product life cycle. It's like all the things that need to happen in a project to become real, to create that solution. So that's another tip that I have. When you create your process map, when you map the activities that I mentioned, you need to align your product life cycle. If you use APQP, should be reflected there, beginning to end, right? Because things do not happen in isolation. So, and also I'll say, in my opinion, or in my experience, this also gives the company a better understanding of what they do during a project and how that actually is just exactly the same as we're trying to do from the quality side with a QMS, right? We are trying to make sure that that sequence of events is happening as expected. Right. So other tools that help us map these traditional ones, well, we have a process map, and well, we could go into all the theory behind how to create process maps. Well, you understand is we are doing the PDCA, I hope. And then we have turtle diagrams. We could do a process diagrams to go deeper and deeper as needed. And here is where the standard operation procedures or the documents have a place as a tool, right? Is once we understand the macro, that we say, okay, these are the sequence of processes that need to happen, we can go into more granular level mapping with diagrams or turtles, your preference, and then we describe this dimension. We describe what happens, right? So a standard operation procedure is really a very, very, very low level tool that is specific for mapping activities. If used correctly, it should actually give a very, very clean description of a diagram like this, right? Without going into geography and without going into organization. Yes, so there are different techniques of doing this. You can start with a standard out of the box and start adjusting it. It doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you cover all your activities in a company. Tricks here, or things that I could advise in this one is, it's a titanic task if you want to cover every single thing here. Yeah, for sure, right? So you cannot go to the nth degree of what's happening in every single process. But if you are a factory, then you need to know that, well, somebody is designing the product, somebody's selling the project, right? Somebody is interacting with your potential new supplier. So there is a purchasing function or process somewhere, right? That doesn't mean that you need to go into the nth degree of describing what they do. You just map them, right? And in your piece, your manufacturing process, let's go back. So if you are here, if you are a factory, well, here in this specific box for a factory, yeah, I will go and map it to the nth degree. I will actually be very granular. But the other ones I just mentioned, I just keep a high level view of them. It's something like Google Maps, right? It's like this would be the process version of, or activities version of Google Maps. Is, well, if I live in Michigan, then I want Google Maps to give me information about every single street, every single traffic light in my area, right? Because I need it for driving. I needed to understand how to move from one place to the other, how are the paths connected, all that. But Google Maps also has map Europe, right? For me, right now, it's probably irrelevant. I just need to know that Europe is somewhere on the other side of the ocean, right? That's the level that I need. For me, it would be enough if it's only the first high level of Europe, right? But I need to know that, because that gives me the complete picture. I know where I am, but then the resolution is decided more into what are your core processes, right? If you are a headquarters, then you probably will not be well deeply into the nth degree of what's happening for the factory, what's happening for the tech center, right? You will not go to the level of saying work instructions of how to test a specific material, because you are in this area. Oh, sorry. You are in this area. You're in the leadership. You're in the management. So for a tech center, it makes more sense to have a high level view of everything that happens in the company, and a very detailed zoom in description of what leadership is doing. And the last one that I have on my list is, well, what happens if we don't do it? What happens if design is done by my customer? Or what happens if, well, we are only built to print, stuff like that? Well, it still happens. You need to map it. You need to say, well, somebody is designing products. It's not us, but it's somebody is doing it. And that way, you know, okay, I need to keep an eye. I need to make my people aware that somebody's designing for us, and if they do take the wrong decisions, we will actually face the consequences as a factory, for example, right? So what you do is you say, well, you declare it here, it's not, and you say, well, this is gray out because it's out of my scope. I don't do it, but now I have a clear view of that, right? It's like saying Google Maps, going back to that one, is, well, if I never leave the U.S., then yeah, I only need to know that there is a continent to the south, there is Asia, there is Europe, but I know they are there because they everything is connected, right? So there is an impact by doing that. Reasons for also doing this, and I cover some of these, is this map, or this way of mapping without including geography and without including titles and org charts, becomes very constant, right? That's what ISO gave us. ISO did this several decades ago and say, well, if you start thinking, or you think about your company in these dimensions, and then you remove the geography, or decouple the geography, decouple the people, and map business processes, map activities, this becomes very constant. So you don't have to redesign your process every time there is a change, right? Unless you have fundamental changes and you move from products to services, okay, that's a kind of thing, even a different company. But as long as you don't do that, it helps you have a system that is closer to reality, right? And that actually is easier to maintain. Also, they are telling us, well, in essence, if you see it through these lenses of activities, companies are very similar, right? They actually, that's why they in their standards, and well, in all their documents, they call everything products and services. They don't go into a specific or even more specific, like so generic, because they say, well, if we look at the entertainment company, manufacturing company, we see at software company, whatever. If we look it through these lenses, it's almost the same. It's like this flow of things are the same, right? So it's kind of saying this one gives you a more standard approach. The downside of this is that it's not that organic for people, because it's an abstract way of seeing it, right? It's way easier to understand a company through the geography side, because, well, we are visual, it's physical, you can go, you can visit, you can see the process flows, the product flows, sorry. But this one, if understood, if the company or it teaches the organization, it brings a lot of clarity, because it tells this story of what's the company's purpose, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter where things happen, who is doing it. What truly matters is that we take needs, and all this sequence of activities happen. So at the end, we deliver products and services, and we get payment, right? And repeat the cycle over and over and over. So this dimension is the keystone, is really the one that should be the framing your quality management system. So connecting again these dots, and this is my last slide, is it doesn't mean that you have to do a system differently. What I'm advocating for here is understand that you have these 4 dimensions: the physical world, or the geography, the people's world, or the organization, the activities world, and the one that I didn't cover is the money flow, right? If you think about them and map them separately, and then you see the relationships, you can create a management system that can adapt to the changes, that actually can be maintained in an easier way, because you don't have to redo big chunks with changes. And I actually can last many years and evolve with the company evolutions. I would say I had seen these type of systems applied to startups that start with the owner and maybe 2 employees, where if you map it this way or if you create it this way, you're basically saying all the roles, all the hats are divided by 2 people, and that's it. It's like they own everything. But then as the organization grows and as you get more locations, your systems is constant. The things that need to happen are still the same. You are just giving, the owner is just giving different caps to the new people, and then changes in responsibility. But the fundamental SOPs, work instructions, remain the same. All right. So, Mari, I think I covered my slides. I hope it's just in time.
Yes, we're doing great. Let's pop on up to that next slide here. So we've got one more poll just to follow up with you guys. I'm going to launch that for you right now. This one is only 2 questions, talking about insight from today's session and how likely you are to advocate for mapping-based QMS design in your org. We would just like to be able to get a little bit of feedback there. Now, following this poll, we also are going to have time for a Q&A session. I see a few of you have popped some questions in throughout the session, but please do utilize that. We do have plenty of time to take some questions from everybody. So it would be great if you have anything you would like to know, get those popped in there right now. And I see we've got some people answering this poll now, which is great. I'll give it just a little bit more here today. Let's see. All right, I'm going to end this poll here and share our results. Thank you everybody who participates in these, by the way. This does give us some really interesting insight and feedback. So it looks like a lot of you are definitely interested in advocating for that mapping-based QMS design, which is really great to hear. So we're going to stop sharing on that, and we can move on to our Q&A now. So let's see. Our first question here is, most of the organizations follow IMS covering QMS, IATF 9001, EMS, and OHS in the automotive sector. What is your suggestion for a single system for an organization which is multi-location and multi-continent? Oh, you're muted, Daniel.
Sorry. Yes, right. And that's a very, very interesting question. Yeah. So when you have multiple locations and you have multiple standards, or, well, you say systems, the approach should be there is a common framework, right? So the geography, the organization is probably common across the board, right? Like you need to have that as a corporate kind of part. When we go to the execution or the task, the high level, like for me, the process map should be the same for all the systems, and it should be the same for all the locations, right? Because the only thing that changes once you start going like more local or into different standards is the scope and the resolution, right? If I map the company and I'm talking about the environmental, then my focus is probably just changing around, or my scope are changing around the processes that are caring about environment, people, and all that. So talking more about the support the kind of area. If I am talking about ISO 9001 or an AITF, I'm probably centering my focus around the manufacturing area, right? Like that's the center of that. If I talk about energy consumption standard, then I'm moving again now to the infrastructure, to those areas, right? But the map should be the same, right? So that'll be my advice. And how you control the scope, imagine you have the map and you are just saying, well, for this audit, and you're saying this is the scope, everything outside cannot be audited, but still happening, right? And then you have different scopes for the same system. Last thing I want to say is the challenge, yes, is to keep that framework consistent around the world. So I don't think well, you will need either a common platform like a hub, a central a system that gives that visibility, where they can see all your locations, can see the same map, they can see the same turtle diagrams, they can see the same geography descriptions, right? So they align to that one. And then they will probably have lower levels where they have their local instructions, right? So the system becomes local when you reach the work instructions kind of level, right? When it's like the how. Yeah, I'll be my view on that. Mhm.
Great. Let's see. Another question we've got here is how would a system like this work for an innovation company that needs to meet ISO 1345485, ISO 9001, IATF plus?
Yeah. So what happens with the innovation, also, or more fluid products and services, where it's not really a copy paste machine for manufacturing, is you still have the same processes, right? The difference is in the design area. You probably want to have more flexibility. So what I'll say is the model applies. It's just how deep you go into prescribing how things are done. In a manufacturing company, physical products, let's say, that are serial produced, you go deep into specifying, we want to do it this way, and nobody deviates, right? Because you want consistency, you want the repeatability, you want the stability, all that. If you're a company that is more kind of trying to shape new products, then you just stay a little higher in your description. You say, well, we have a testing phase, for example, and the testing phase consists on validating high-level objectives. And if you are again saying, well, in automotive industry, for example, like there is a PPAP, like you have to hard code exactly what are your expected outputs. But the model, I'll say, is still valid. And by doing this, you can actually create the elements for all the systems that or the standards that you are mentioning, 9001 AITF, because it would be an overlap. The pieces would be common.
Great. Let's see. We have, how do you ensure that all of the job descriptions are constantly assigned to an owner, especially when the task crosses from one department to another?
Yes, and that's that's a one that I spent I'll say a lot of years trying to figure out, right? Well, the way job descriptions are created typically hard code all this, right? Like you job are responsible for this, and that. The way to do that is your description, sorry, should be telling the employee which are your roles. So they're saying, well, this job, you are owner of this process. You are responsible for executing this in this other process, right? So it becomes more a list of roles that the job has, and then it's pointing to your procedures, right? Say, well, if you are the owner of correction, prevention, and improvement, let's say, well, all the description of what that means is in the system, right? So if I change that responsibility from one job to the other, I take that line, I just move it to the other job description, and now this person knows all this, right? Instead of having to go through recreating all my job descriptions. So I will say if it's done manually, it becomes tedious depending on the size of your organization. But there are good software packages out there that allow you to do that, and even get an even fancier way of saying, well, when you point to a responsibility, then it populates and creates all the elements of your job description almost on the fly, right? But it depends on how a large organization is and how fancy you want to go. But in principle, it's about that. Is don't hard code your job descriptions.
Makes sense. All right, let's see. I have this one. Is it my responsibility to guide my suppliers to adopt this approach or obtain certifications and other standards? Often they are held back by resources like money. How can I help them?
Yeah. That's why I think that, well, here is where you have to give them the model, I'll say the standard model, ideal model, right? Because you can construct these models and say, describe what you do versus describe what's the ideal state. For suppliers, typically you give them like, this is the map, this is what you have, and then you start from there. You are giving them like the 80% solution. It's still something they have to do on their own because they know the organization. But it's not different from the old approach of saying, well, follow these processes and here are the procedures. It's just that we are giving them a better starting point, right? So for me, it's yeah, I when I work with the purchasing and supplier development organizations, I encourage them to provide them even, this is how your process map should look. Here are standard process diagrams or turtle diagrams, and here is your starting point for the procedures that I want. You take it from there, because if they take it from there, okay, they now have the same framework as you do, and then you are certain that they are following this path instead of just taking a blank piece of paper and start creating documents or copying it from other organizations that might not even be close to what they do. Mm-hmm.
All right, we've got time for just a couple more questions here. So let's see, except Aero Excellence model, is there any simple model available to support this for a moderate organization?
Is there any simple model available? Yeah, I'll say ISO 9001, if read correctly, is giving you this recipe. It's a blueprint. I mean, years ago, I did the exercise of going clause by clause, and if you actually start reading, but it's not just 9001. You need 9000, 9001, and 9004, because plus 9002, but the complete collection is giving you this idea. 9001 is only the requirements. But as I said, I map all these and say, well, they are telling you, have this process, and this is the output, and then it goes here, and then you do that, and you do that. If you truly go through that, you construct a process map. That's the recipe. So for me, a good implementation of ISO 9001 should lead to this. The trick is not to fall into, I wanna comply with whatever I have, right? It's like to understand that they are giving you a recipe. It's not just check the boxes to each of the requirements, or skipping or just trying to meet the shells, right? Because there are a lot of shoulds, there are a lot of can, there is a lot of softer requirements or even suggestions that are part of this. So I'll say ISO 9001 for me is the one to go. Mm-hmm.
All right, and let's take one more here. How can we make sure we map our activities based on real processes instead of just department tasks? And does this help people work more across teams and reduce silo thinking?
Yes, that's we're getting into the real thing. That's a common thing that's a common mistake. In our minds, we mix departments, we mix functions and with processes, and sometimes even with locations, right? So yes, the trick is start with your process map. I'll say start with your process map and avoid anything that sounds like a department. For example, the one that is conflicting is human resources. Is that a department? Is that a process? Or is that a function? It could be any, right? Because we name in our organizations, we name a lot of our departments against a process, or it sounds like that, but it's not the same. So for me, it's making it very clear that if we are talking about departments, that's an org chart. I should see it in the org chart. If I go to the process map and I see departments represented, that's no longer a process map, because it doesn't say process/department map. We need to go into activities. How I do it personally? Well, it should be an action, right? So your processes or business processes or next level processes should always be an action. If we say human resources, that's not enough. If I say people management, okay, I'm managing people. That's a process, that's an activity, right? If I cannot translate that into an action, it's probably either a department, an area, or it could, sometimes I had even see that they have a building one, is like building one is not a process, right? So that's I'll say that's my suggestion is kind of go through your process map, make sure that everything is referring to actions. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, thank you everybody for all of the great questions. Sorry we're always not able to get to all of them, but unfortunately that's how it goes. So we're just going to do some wrap up here with our next slide. So you can visit our website for our blog posts, tools, and more. That's at plexusintl.com. That's also where you can find our course catalog. You can find us on YouTube at plexusintl, where this webinar and all previous webinars will be uploaded. I will also send you an email link to the uploaded webinar once that has been completed. And then you can find us on LinkedIn at Plexus International. Just wanted to say thank you again for everybody attending today. We do have a very short final survey following the end of this webinar. When you leave, we really appreciate and value any feedback you're able to provide. It takes less than a minute. So we would just like to ask you to help us out with that. But thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, Daniel, for your hosting today and for the great insight. And we will see you all in the next one.